All right, guys, this next thing I want to talk to you guys about is the different types of photography. This is something that I get a lot of questions about. How do people get these types of photography? How do they make the picture look this way? We're going to hop right into it, and I'm going to show you some examples of what you can do in order to make your pictures the same way, okay? So hopping on into here, our first picture here is of just kind of waves that kind of look very like cloudy almost. You see that? So the way this is achieved is using what we talked about earlier. You want to lower the shutter speed. So make the shutter speed open for a long period of time. So one of the things that you got to remember is that by having the lower shutter speed, let's say like 1 second or 2 seconds, it's going to capture all the information during that entire 1 or 2 seconds. And in turn, you get a picture like this because all the time that the picture is open, it's capturing all that information. And so one thing that you can see also from here is that because the picture was captured with a slow shutter speed, it was used on a tripod. And the reason why you know that is because the background is in focus. So if you were to take a picture at let's say a 2-second shutter speed, a 5-second shutter speed, something where it's open for a long period of time, if you're hand holding that, you're gonna definitely see some shake. The background's going to be blurry. It's not going to be in focus the way that we'd like it. And so you can definitely tell that this was taken with a tripod. So just remember that if you ever want the water to look this way, what you want to do is just take it with a slow shutter speed. Okay. This next one, it's the same thing. So what this is, we have it on a tripod right here. And the water looks very wavy, right? I mean, it looks almost cloudy. It looks almost unreal, and that's because of that slow shutter speed. In the area, if you look up to the in the top right, you can see that it looks a little interesting. It's almost like not real how wave and how waters fall. It's because the information that's being captured is captured over a longer period of time than we're used to. If this was done with a fast shutter, you'd be able to see the water look more natural. But because the shutter speed is slow, you're capturing the water over a longer period of time and it's making it look kind of smooth and finessed. But then the rocks in the foreground and in the background are all in focus because it's on a tripod. So if you ever want to achieve something like this in a waterfall or any type of water, what you're going to want to do is put it on a tripod. You want to make the shutter speed slower. So you want the shutter speed to be 1 second, 5 seconds, 10 seconds, and then adjust your aperture and your ISO accordingly to make sure that the shutter speed is slow enough to make the picture look this way. Now, moving on to another type of photography is night photography. Now, to capture good night photos, again, you're going to want to, and remember, for all these pictures, there's 3 things you're looking at: your aperture, your f-stop, and your shutter speed. You're going to use these 3 things in order to get all the pictures that you want. Okay. So in this case, again, we're going to have a slow shutter speed, maybe like 1 second, 5 seconds, 10 seconds. And what we want to do at nighttime is we want to keep the ISO as low as possible, because by increasing the ISO, what's going to happen is that you're going to have an increased level in noise. Remember, noises are the little artifacts that we see that make the picture look very kind of ugly, and it distracts you. It almost looks like a TV fuzz. So the lower you keep the ISO, the more crisp and creamy and just nice and overall clean the picture will look. So like, for example, with this one right here, we have, you don't see very much noise because the ISO is low. And then you can see that everything's kind of in focus because it's on a tripod. And then also it's nighttime. And so in order to get the light to the sensor, you make sure that the shutter speed is very slow. Again, here's another night picture. Same idea. Slow shutter speed on a tripod. This is actually a little bit different because you have human beings who naturally move, and you see how they're pretty much in focus. That lets you know that they are actually standing still to make sure that they stay in focus. So this is kind of a stage shot where the people are in focus, but it's the same kind of thing. You want the low ISO. You want to have you want to increase you want to make sure that your shutter speed is very slow. And then even for this, the f-stop is actually F11 or F8, and you can tell that because the background, you can see more of the background. And so with this one right here, I want to show you guys an example of what happens when you do hold the camera and you're trying to shoot at nighttime. So in this picture, this is a handheld 2 second photo. So holding it in your hand for 2 seconds and trying to take a picture. Do you see how it's blurry? Like they're not quite in focus. This is what happens when you try to take a picture at nighttime with hand holding versus using a tripod. You're going to get a nice amount of motion blur, and the picture is not going to be sharp. And ultimately, it looks very amateurish because it's like that. But I want to show you guys an example of what happens when you try to hand hold the camera using a slow shutter speed at nighttime. And with this one, this is an example of what you can do in order to compensate sometimes. Let's say it is daytime and you want to kind of portray it might be a later time or a nighttime. This is a picture that you can use. All you do is just make it black and white in order to kind of add a little bit of dynamic look to the picture, add a kind of mystery to the picture. Just a different type of photo I wanted to show you guys. And as you can see, the leading lines that we talked about, right? The walkway that we talked about earlier, you can see that being used in this picture. But I wanted to show you guys a couple of pictures that were like more street photography. This next one right here, you can see that this person is actually working out, right? And they're sharp as a tack, right? So with this one, I can tell you that the photo was taken with a very high shutter speed. So 1/500th of a second, 1/1000th of a second. And the reason why they were taken with a very high shutter speed is because you want to capture them in midair, you want to capture them in mid-flight, and you want them to be sharp. So if they were captured with a low shutter speed, they would look very blurry. So what we did here is we increased the shutter speed to f500 or f1000. We had the f-stop is probably about an f4 in order to make the background a little bit more blurry. And then we can play around with the ISO to make sure that the exposure is properly exposed. Okay. And now here we go with another one. So this one right here is at a racetrack. And so you can see here that this is captured at a high frame rate as well. So with a high shutter speed as well. So as you can see things like the horse's muscles. You can see the horse's feet, the dirt that's kicking up, all these extreme details. And you can also see the numbers in the background will let you know that it's not very, the aperture is more like a f8, f11, because you can see more of the background, but also, it's at like 1/1000th of a second on the shutter speed because of the level of detail and the sharpness of the image. And so here's another image, the same thing, same idea. What we have here is a shutter speed that's very high, f1000, f1500. And just remember, if you ever go to a higher shutter speed where you're going to lose light, you can always compensate for that light by using the other two things. So two ways that you can do that, right? If let's say, for example, I was at 1/1500th of a second, right, for my shutter speed, and it was way too dark. What I can do is I can increase my ISO and I can widen my aperture in order to make sure that I get more light from the wider aperture, and then more light from the increased ISO. Okay, now what we have here is this is a portrait. This is an idea for a portrait. I want to get you guys back kind of thinking about why you're shooting portraits, how you're shooting portraits, how to make them look good. So there's a couple of things that I want you guys to see here. The first thing is the person is dressed in a way that kind of matches. They look great. They have makeup. Those are smaller kind of intangibles that you want to kind of think about later on in your career as you kind of want to grow and become more professional. But ultimately, as far as the framing of the shot, you can see here that they are on the left side of the frame. There's someone in the background, but ultimately the shallow depth of field is what really makes this portrait great, right? So your eyes are being drawn to the lady. She looks great, and having it at an f2.8 brings all the attention to her, and there's just someone in the background. And it also brings a level of mystery. Why is the guy in the background? What is he doing there? Are they in a relationship? All these great questions that make you ask about the picture. And that's what art is. That's what I want you guys to really think about. Why are you taking this picture? What do you want the person to get out of it? And how can you make your pictures better? So just remember the things we talked about in order to continue to make your pictures a little bit better. Okay. All right, here's another one of a young little boy. You see here, we talked about earlier, right? The rule of thirds. You see he's on the right side of the picture. So he's on that rule of thirds. There's some negative space on the left side. The picture's taken at a lower angle to kind of make him look a little bit bigger, right? And then in the picture, it makes you wonder. And the picture should always make the person ask questions, right? In this picture, you're probably asking, who is he looking at? Why is he looking in that direction? He's looking up. Is it somebody taller than him? Those are all great ideas, great questions that were taken in this picture. And that's one of the things I want you guys to think about when you're taking pictures is why are you doing it? What's the purpose behind it? But also remember we talked about with how you frame the picture, right? See how there's no shadows on his face? That's not distracting you, right? So find a shaded area to take the picture to make sure that the picture is flat and that it's balanced. Find an area where, since you're taking a portrait, make sure you're shooting at a shallower depth of field to make sure that all the attention is drawn on the person in the foreground versus the background. All those different little things make a huge difference. Here's another example of a couple shooting at a high. Not high. Here's another picture of a couple with a shallow depth of field. You see the background's blurred out. All the attention's drawn to them, right? They're smiling, they're looking off. All these different great things. It could just be a portrait for, just a couple or something, but all these great things that you can think about when you're taking a picture. I want you guys to really think about that. What makes this picture good? I think the one of the best things about this picture is that it's on the left side of the screen that their colors are balanced, right? There's no lights hitting them in the side of the face. There's no lights from the trees that are coming on them. There's all these really little intricate details that I want you to think about when you're taking your pictures in order to make them look better. Okay, now this next one right here is for wildlife. If you've ever taken wildlife, I want you guys to think about what's the purpose of wildlife. Do you want to take the full picture of the animal? Do you want to get a certain portion of the animal? Think about those things when you're taking these pictures. And then also when you're taking pictures of wildlife, you're probably going to want to shoot at a higher shutter speed because animals move quickly and you want the picture to be sharp. So with that being said, another cool thing too is that if you do have a high megapixel camera, right, a larger sensor camera, you can always zoom in after you take the picture. So like with this picture, right, we see here that the picture was taking a larger picture of the animal, but you can always zoom in, right, to get those finer details of the animal. And the same thing with this picture right here, the bird. You see here the full body picture of the bird, nice and sharp, but you can always zoom in to get even closer to get more detail on the animal. All right, and this next part I want to talk to you guys about is going to be talking about how do you do time lapse. And this is it's kind of an art to time lapse, and I want you guys to know that it takes time, and I can help you guys out with that. But I ultimately want you guys to get a little bit of information about how and why you do it. So the first thing that you're going to need is you're going to need your tripod. Okay. Once you get your tripod, you're going to need either an intervalometer or the camera's going to have to come equipped with an intervalometer. And so either one of these things work, but ultimately you're going to need one of those two things. And what the intervalometer does is it allows the camera to take a picture every second, every 2 seconds, every 5 seconds, however long you decide, and it'll do that consistently for as long as you want. What you do is after you're done with all that, the camera, you can go ahead and take all those photos into a software, and it will compile all those photos into a video for you to create that time lapse. So one of the softwares that I use personally, that I've used for years, is called LR Timelapse. It is a paid service, but it's a great, easy way to get started. It does most of the work for you. All you do is really just put your pictures in. They have great tutorials online to help you out. But ultimately, guys, that's the thing that you're gonna do when you're trying to shoot a time lapse. What you're gonna do is you're gonna set up your tripod. You have to have a tripod, or you can sit it on like a brick or something. But it has to be stable. You can't handhold in a time lapse. So you're gonna have it stable. I recommend on a tripod. You're gonna have to have either an intervalometer, right, or you're gonna have to have an intervalometer built into your camera. And you're going to have the pictures taken regularly, consistently, successively. And then after you're done, you're going to take all those pictures and you're going to compile them in your software. And then voila, you'll have your time lapse. So I know that was a little bit long-winded, but I really wanted to get you guys kind of understanding a little bit more about the different types of pictures, why you're taking those pictures, and ultimately making sure that you guys understand what you're trying to do, why you're trying to do it, and don't just go out and take pictures randomly. You'll really separate yourself from other people if you start taking pictures with a purpose.